When you get to be my age, you think you've seen most of what life has to offer. The joy, the heartache, the quiet, everyday miracles. You build your life, brick by brick. You raise your children, you love your husband, you create a home, and you think you understand the world. Then, in a single afternoon, everything you thought was solid just turns to dust. My name is Carol, and if you're sitting there feeling a little lost or a little hurt, or maybe like the people you loved most have forgotten your worth, I want you to hear my story. It's not an easy one to tell. It starts with a goodbye, and it ends with me finding a part of myself I thought was gone forever. It all began with the house. My house. The one my late husband Tom and I bought 42 years ago. It wasn't a mansion. It was a 3-bedroom ranch with a porch that needed painting and a backyard that was just the right size for a swing set. We paid that mortgage off, dime by dime, year by year. Every scuff on the hardwood floor had a memory. The smell of Tom's pipe tobacco was still faintly in the study, even years after he passed. That house was my anchor. It was the last tangible piece of the life we built together. But it was also just a house. And my daughter, my Sarah, she had a dream. I remember the day she and Mark came over, their faces just glowing. They had a brochure. It was for one of those new developments, a big, beautiful 2-story home with a granite kitchen and a yard that backed onto a little creek. Sarah called it their forever home. She was so excited, her words tumbling over each other. Mark, he was always the more practical one. He cleared his throat and started talking about interest rates and down payments. The number they mentioned, it was staggering. I saw the light in Sarah's eyes dim just a little. They didn't have nearly enough for the down payment the bank required. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through my quiet house. I ran my hand over the banister Tom had installed himself. I stood in Sarah's old bedroom where the faded ghost of a unicorn sticker was still on the closet door. And I knew what I had to do. A week later, I called them over for dinner. I made Sarah's favorite, my lasagna. After we'd eaten, I slid the paperwork across the table. I was selling my house, my paid-off, mortgage-free house, and I was giving them every single penny of the equity for their down payment. The silence was so loud. Then Sarah, she burst into tears. She threw her arms around me. "Oh, Mom, no, we can't let you do that. This is your home." I held her tight. "You are my home, sweetheart. You and those 2 beautiful grandbabies of mine. This is what family does." Mark was quieter. He looked at the papers, then at me. "Carol, this is, incredibly generous. Are you sure?" I told him I was sure, but then I laid out the unspoken agreement, the one I thought we all understood. "There's an in-law suite on the first floor plan. That will be my room. I'll live with you. I'll help with the kids. We'll be a family." They both nodded, their faces full of gratitude. "Of course, Mom," Sarah said. "It'll be perfect." It felt perfect. It felt right. I was trading bricks and mortar for a future, for a life woven into the daily fabric of my daughter and grandchildren. What could be better than that? The sale went through faster than I thought it would. Watching the new family, a young couple not unlike Tom and I had been, carry their boxes into my house, it was a bittersweet ache. But I packed my wife into a few dozen boxes, keeping only the most precious things. Tom's photo albums, my mother's china. The rest, I let go of. I was moving forward. The first 2 years in the new house were wonderful, truly. I had my own little space, a bedroom, a small sitting room, and a bathroom, but my door was always open. Little Mia, who was 4, and Jake, who was 2, would come tumbling in every morning, their little feet pitter-pattering on my floor, jumping into my bed for cuddles. I was the full-time grandma. I did the school runs, made the lunches, kissed the scraped knees. I read 1,000 bedtime stories. I became the chief negotiator for eating broccoli. I loved it. It gave me a purpose. Sarah and Mark could focus on their careers, and I got to be the steady, loving presence for my grandkids. I used my Social Security check to buy the groceries for the whole house. I never asked for a dime for rent or utilities. Why would I? This was my family. This was the agreement. But slowly, so slowly, I almost didn't notice, the atmosphere began to change. It started with little things. Mark would make comments at dinner. "The grocery bill seems high this week, Carol." Or, "The energy company says our usage is through the roof." He'd say it with a little laugh, but his eyes didn't laugh. Sarah started working later hours. When she was home, she was often on her phone, distracted. Our talks over a cup of tea in the evening became less frequent. She started deferring to Mark on decisions she and I would have talked about for hours: where to go on vacation, what to do for Jake's birthday. One night, I was coming downstairs to get a glass of water. Their bedroom door was slightly ajar. I heard Mark's voice, low and tense. It's a lot, Sarah. Having someone else in the house all the time. We never have any privacy. We never get to be just us." My heart sank into my slippers. I heard Sarah's reply, muffled, tired. "She helps so much, Mark, and she gave us this house." "She gave us a down payment," he corrected, his voice sharp. "We're the ones paying the massive mortgage every month. We're the ones carrying the weight. Sometimes it feels like we're just treading water, and she's, I don't know, an extra weight." I backed away from the stairs, my face hot with shame. An extra weight. The words echoed in my head. I went back to my room and cried silent tears into my pillow. But the next morning, I brushed it off. I told myself it was just stress. Mark was under pressure at work. Every family has tensions. I decided I would try harder, be less of a presence. I started staying in my suite more in the evenings. I bought the groceries with even more care, clipping coupons like my life depended on it. But the seed had been planted, and it was growing. The big blow-up happened on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday. It was raining. I had just gotten back from the grocery store. I'd taken Mia to school, dropped Jake at preschool, and done the weekly shop. My cart was full, my arms aching. I remember being proud because I'd found a great deal on chicken and the kids' favorite cereal was on sale. I pulled into the driveway, the rain pattering on the roof of my little sedan. And that's when I saw it. Sitting on the covered front porch, looking stark and out of place against the cheerful green paint of their dream home. My suitcase. The big hardshell one I use for the life I used to have. The one Tom and I bought for our anniversary trip to Italy. My brain couldn't make sense of it. Why was my suitcase on the porch? Had Sarah thought about donating it? But it was clean. It was dry. Then the front door opened. Sarah stood there. She wasn't in her work clothes. She was in yoga pants and an old t-shirt, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her face was a mask. It was my daughter's face, but the light in her eyes was gone. "Mom?" she said. Her voice was flat, cold. I got out of the car, the rain starting to soak my hair. "Sarah, honey, what's going on? Why is my suitcase out here?" "We need to talk," she said. She didn't move to let me in. A cold dread, colder than the rain, started to seep into my bones. "Okay, let's talk inside. Let me just get these groceries in." "No," she said, and that one word was like a door slamming shut. "Mark and we've been talking a lot. We need space, Mom. We need to be a family, just the four of us." I stared at her, the grocery bags feeling like lead weights in my hands. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you're holding us back. The words came out in a rush, as if she'd been rehearsing them. You're stifling us, you're stifling my growth as a mother, and you're stifling our growth as a family unit. We can't move forward with you here. It felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I actually took a step back. The world tilted. Stifling you? Sarah, I take care of your children. I buy your food. I gave you this house. You gave us a down payment, she snapped, and now the anger was there, raw and ugly. And we are grateful, but we can't live with you forever. We need our own life. Don't you see? You're always here, hovering. You have opinions on everything from what the kids eat to how we discipline them. This is our house, and we need you to leave. I looked from her stony face to the suitcase. The reality of the situation finally crashed down on me. They weren't asking, they were telling. They had packed my things, or at least enough to get me started, and put them on the porch. Where am I supposed to go? My voice was a whisper, choked with tears I was refusing to shed in front of her. That's not our problem, Mom, she said, and that was her voice, so cold, so final. It was the voice of a stranger. You're a grown woman. Figure it out. We need you to move out today. She turned and went back inside. I heard the deadbolt click into place. A sound so small, so definitive. I stood there in the rain, staring at the closed door. The house I bought, the house I lived in, the grandchildren I loved more than life itself were just on the other side of that wood and paint. And I was locked out. I don't know how long I stood there. The rain soaked through my coat. Finally, on numb legs, I put the grocery bags on the porch, next to the suitcase. I got in my car. I looked at my hands on the steering wheel. They were shaking. And then I drove. I had nowhere to go. I drove for an hour, maybe 2. I drove. The tears came then, great heaving sobs that made it hard to see the road. I had to pull over in the parking lot of a strip mall. I cried for Tom. I cried for the home I'd sold. I cried for my grandchildren. I cried for the daughter I thought I knew. Where does a 68-year-old woman with a car full of her life and a broken heart go? I couldn't face a friend. The shame was too immense. How could I explain that my own daughter had thrown me out? So I did the only thing I could think of. I found a cheap motel off the highway, the kind with flickering neon signs and doors that opened to the outside. I paid for a week with my credit card, the one I used for emergencies. I guess this qualified. The room smelled of stale cigarettes and bleach. I dragged my suitcase inside, the wheels catching on the cheap, stained carpet. I sat on the edge of the bedspread rough and synthetic under my hands, and I looked around. This was it. This was what was left of my life. The first few days were a blur of grief. I didn't eat. I barely slept. I just stared at the wall or the terrible daytime television. The silence was deafening. No little feet. No childish laughter. No, Nana, look! Just the hum of the ancient air conditioner and the sound of traffic from the highway. But around day 4, something shifted. The grief was still there, a heavy stone in my chest, but a tiny, fragile spark of anger ignited beneath it. It wasn't a raging fire. It was a pilot light. Was this it? Was this how my story ended? Alone in a motel room, discarded like yesterday's news? No. I got up. I took a shower. I put on clean clothes, and I went to the local library. I used their computer, my fingers clumsy on the keyboard. I looked up tenant rights. I wasn't a tenant, not really, but I had lived there for years. I'd established residency. What they did was an illegal eviction. But suing my daughter to get back into that house? The thought made me sick. I didn't want to be where I wasn't wanted. Then I found an article about something called promissory estoppel. It's a fancy legal term, but it basically means this. If you make a promise to someone and they rely on that promise to their detriment, you can't just go back on your word. I had promised them a massive financial gift based on their promise of a home for life. They had relied on it, and I had been detrimentally affected. I'd lost my own home. I printed out the article. My hands were trembling, but it was no longer from sadness. It was from a sense of possibility. The next day, I called a lawyer, a nice young woman named Amanda. I told her my story, my voice shaking. She listened, not with pity, but with a sharp, focused attention. When I was done, she was quiet for a moment. She said gently, "What they did was morally reprehensible and very likely legally actionable. We could sue for unjust enrichment. They were unjustly enriched by your down payment, and you have been unjustly impoverished. We have a very strong case." I took a deep breath. "What would we be suing for?" I asked. "The value of your down payment, plus damages for the illegal eviction. Possibly more." It was a staggering amount of money, enough to change my life. Again. I told her I needed to think about it. I left her office and drove back to the motel. Did I want to sue my own daughter? The little girl I'd taught to ride a bike? The woman I'd held while she labored with her own children? The idea felt like a betrayal of everything I was. But what she had done? That was a betrayal too. I didn't make a decision that day. Instead, I started to rebuild, piece by piece. I got a part-time job, nothing glamorous. I worked at a local garden center. I've always had a green thumb, and being around the plants, the smell of damp earth and flowers, it soothed my soul. The pay was minimal, but there was something. I found a tiny one-bedroom apartment. It was cramped, and the kitchen was from the 1970s. But it was clean, and it was mine. I unpacked my boxes. I put out the photo of Tom on our wedding day. I placed my mother's china in the cupboard, even though I'd probably never use it. These things were my history. They were me. I reached out to old friends I'd neglected while I was being super nana. At first, it was awkward. But then, over coffee, the years melted away. They listened. They held my hand. They didn't offer platitudes. They just offered their presence. I started going to a book club. I even signed up for a watercolor class at the community center. I was terrible at it, but I laughed for the first time in months. I was building a life. A small, quiet life, but it was my life. I wasn't living for Sarah or for Mia and Jake. I was living for Carol. And you know what? Carol was starting to be okay. A year passed. A whole year. The sharp, jagged pain of the betrayal had faded to a dull, permanent ache, like an old injury that acts up when it rains. I thought about the kids every single day. I wondered what they were learning in school, if Mia had lost a tooth, if Jake's hair was still that crazy, curly mess. It was a physical pain missing them. I never filed the lawsuit. In the end, I couldn't do it. It would have tied me to them in a cycle of anger and litigation that would have poisoned my soul. Letting go of the money was the price I paid for my own peace. It was the hardest and most liberating decision I ever made. And then, one rainy afternoon, it seems the big moments in my life always happen in the rain, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I thought it was a package. I opened the door, and there she was. Sarah. She looked hollow. Her clothes were hanging off her, her hair was lank, and there were dark circles under her eyes that no amount of sleep could fix. She was holding a soaked, cheap umbrella. She looked 10 years older. "Mom," she whispered, her voice cracking. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. The last time I'd seen her, she was a statue of cold resolve. Now she was a ghost. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice small. I stepped aside. She walked into my small apartment, her eyes taking in the modest but cozy space, the secondhand furniture, my watercolor attempts framed on the wall, the photo of Tom. She burst into tears. Not the graceful, quiet tears of a movie, but great, racking sobs that shook her whole body. She collapsed onto my sofa. "He left me, Mom," she cried. "Mark. He met someone at work. He moved out 3 months ago." I stood there, my hand still on the door. I didn't say anything. "It all fell apart," she sobbed. "After you left, everything fell apart. The childcare costs were astronomical. We were fighting all the time about money, about the kids, about everything. The mortgage, it was too much. We couldn't keep up. The bank, they're foreclosing on the house, Mom. We're losing it. We're losing everything." She looked up at me, her face a mess of tears and regret. I was so stupid. I was so stupid. I listened to him. He kept saying you were a burden, that we'd be better off, that we needed to be independent. And I was so tired, and I believed him. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry." She buried her hands in her hands. "I have nowhere to go. The kids, they're with a friend, but I can't do this alone. Please, can we come here? Can we stay with you? Please forgive me. I need my mom." There it was, the moment I had dreamed of and dreaded. The apology, the plea for help, the chance to have my family back. I looked at my daughter, broken and desperate on my sofa, and I felt a profound sense of calm. The storm inside me had finally quieted. I walked over and sat in the armchair across from her. I didn't go to her. I didn't hold her. "Sarah," I said, my voice steady, "look at me." A wave of relief washed over her face. "Oh, thank you, Mom. Thank you. I promise it'll be different. I held up a hand. "Wait, I forgive you, but that doesn't mean things can go back to the way they were." The relief on her face froze, then slowly melted into confusion. What do you mean?" "I mean, you cannot move in here, Sarah. This is my home. It's small, and it's mine. My days of sacrificing my entire existence, my home, my security for you are over." Her face crumpled. "But the kids, your grandchildren." "I love Mia and Jake with all my heart," I said, and I meant it. The words were true and sharp. "And I want to be in their lives, but it will be on new terms. We can have a relationship. You can bring them to visit. We can go to the park. I will be their grandmother, but I will not be their full-time caregiver. I will not bankroll your life. I will not give up my home again." She stared at me as if I were speaking a foreign language. You're turning me away? After everything?" "No," I said softly. "I'm holding myself for myself. For the first time in my life, Sarah, I am not someone's wife, or someone's mother, or someone's free nanny. I am Carol, and I have value beyond what I can do for other people." The silence in the room was thick. She had come here expecting the mother she'd always known, the one who would fix everything, who would absorb the blow, who would sacrifice. She wasn't prepared for this version of me, this stronger, quieter, more resilient version. "What am I supposed to do?" she whispered, her voice full of defeat. You will figure it out. You're a grown woman. You will find a job. You will find an apartment you can afford. You will be the mother your children need. It will be hard, the hardest thing you've ever done, but you will do it. I stood up and went to my small desk. I wrote down a number on a piece of paper. This is the name of a social worker I know from the garden center. She can help you find resources, shelter, food assistance, counseling. It's a start. I handed her the paper. She took it, her fingers trembling. This is cruel, she said, her voice hardening again, but it was a weak, brittle hardness. No, honey, I said, my voice filled with a sadness that was as deep as the ocean. What you did to me on that porch was cruel. This is just life. This is consequences. And this is me finally learning to love myself as much as I've always loved you. She stood up, clutching the piece of paper. She looked lost. She walked to the door and paused, her hand on the knob. I am sorry, Mom, she said again, without turning around. I know, I said, and I truly do forgive you, for my own peace. But forgiveness isn't a reset button. It doesn't erase what happened. She nodded, a tiny, broken movement. Then she opened the door and walked out into the rain. I didn't feel triumphant watching her leave. I didn't feel like I'd won some kind of revenge. My heart broke all over again. For her, for my grandchildren, for the relationship we might have had. But for the first time, it broke from a place of strength, not of shattering. That was 6 months ago. Sarah did find a small apartment. She's working as a receptionist. It's a struggle for her every single day. She brings the kids over every other Sunday. We bake cookies, we read stories. We are careful with each other, like two people who have been badly burned. It's not the relationship I dreamed of. It's distant, it's scarred, but it's real, and it's on my terms. I am their grandmother, not their safety net. If you take anything from my story, please let it be this. Your value is not defined by your utility. You are not just a caregiver, a bank account, a free babysitter. You are a person with your own dreams, your own peace, your own right to a life that belongs to you. Sacrifice for those you love? Yes, of course. But never sacrifice yourself completely. Never hand over the keys to your own soul. I lost my house. I lost the version of my daughter I thought I knew. But I found myself. And at 68 years old, starting over with nothing but a small apartment and a broken heart, I discovered that I am stronger than I ever imagined. So if you're in a storm right now, if you feel like you've been thrown away, just hold on. Hold on to that tiny, fragile spark of yourself. Nurture it, protect it, because that spark is your life, and it is worth fighting for. Be kind to yourselves. You are worth so much more than you know.